The United States, land of freedom, light, and darkness that no one dares to speak of. Behind the tourist attractions and neon lights lie forgotten roads, sealed rooms, and chilling memories that never made the headlines. But they exist. And the people who live through them? They don't sleep the same way anymore. Tonight, you're not just listening to stories. You're stepping into 16 real-life nightmares, tales that slipped through cracks in the silence. A stranger at the window, a voice on the baby monitor whispering your name, a door that opens, even when it's locked. These aren't myths. These are stories with teeth. So settle in, but don't get too comfortable. Because once you start listening, the stories start watching. Have you ever walked through the stillness of the night? The world so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat, only to feel a presence behind you, a shadow that moves when you don't? That's what happened to me, on a routine walk with my dog, where the familiar turned into a nightmare. It was a crisp autumn evening in the suburbs of a small town, the kind of place where streetlights flicker and the woods whisper secrets. I was alone with my dog, a loyal companion who'd always made me feel safe, until that night when a man emerged from the trees, his intentions ablaze in the dark, and turned a simple walk into a flight for survival. This is the story of the stranger who hunted me, the woods that hid him, and the fear that still stalks my every step. I'd always loved the quiet of the suburbs, a stark contrast to the city I'd left behind after a decade of noise and chaos. My new home sat on the edge of town, where the streets gave way to a sprawling forest, its trees ancient and gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal hands. I'd moved here for peace, for the kind of life where you could hear the crickets sing and see the stars without a haze of pollution. My dog, a scruffy terrier with a heart bigger than his size, was my constant companion, his eager barks a soundtrack. To our evening walks, we'd follow the same path each night, a loop through the neighborhood that skirted the woods, the streetlights casting a warm glow on the pavement, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. It was a ritual that grounded me, a moment of calm in a world that had felt unsteady since my father's passing 2 years ago. His absence a weight I carried in every step. That night, the moon was a sliver, its light barely piercing the canopy of the woods, leaving the world in shades of gray. I clipped the leash to my dog's collar, his tail wagging as we stepped out, the cool air brushing my skin like a lover's touch. The neighborhood was silent, the houses dark, their windows reflecting the faint glow of streetlights, as if they too were asleep. We walked our usual route, the pavement familiar under my sneakers, my dog trotting ahead, his nose to the ground, chasing scents I couldn't perceive. For the first 10 minutes, it was perfect, a moment of peace where the world felt right. My dog's gentle tug a reminder of the bond we shared. I let my mind wander, thinking of my father, his laughter, the way he'd taught me to love the night, to find beauty in its stillness. But then it changed. A shift so subtle I almost missed. It a prickle on the back of my neck, a feeling of being watched as if the night had grown eyes. I glanced around, the street empty. The woods to my left a wall of shadow, their depths impenetrable under the faint moonlight. My dog slowed, his ears perking, his body tensing, a low growl rumbling in his throat. I tightened my grip on the leash, my heart picking up a beat, the air suddenly heavy as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind, the kind of fear that comes from too many late-night stories. But the feeling grew, a weight pressing against my chest, urging me to move faster. I heard it then, a rustle in the trees, the snap of a twig, too deliberate to be the wind. I turned, my dog barking now, sharp and urgent, his eyes fixed on the woods. A figure stepped out, a man, tall and broad, his silhouette looming against the trees, his presence a violation of the night's stillness. He was massive, his shoulders wide, his frame heavy with muscle, his clothes tattered, as if he'd been living in the wild for years. His face was shadowed, but his eyes caught the streetlight, glinting with a hunger that made my blood run cold. He moved toward me, his steps slow but purposeful. A predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. My dog lunged, barking furiously, but I held him back, my voice trembling as I called out, "Who's there?" The man stopped, his head tilting, his voice rough as gravel. "Hey, can I pet your dog?" he asked. The words innocent but laced with something darker, something that turned my stomach. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "No, sorry, he's not good with strangers." His smile was a slash in the dark, his teeth bared, and he took another step closer, his voice rising. "Come on, I just want to pet him." My dog snarled, his body rigid, and I backed away, my heart pounding, the leash taut in my hand. The man's smile vanished, his face twisting with anger, and he shouted, "Let me pet your dog." His voice was a roar, a sound that echoed through the night, a threat that sent me running. I turned and fled, my dog sprinting beside me, his barks a frantic alarm as the man's footsteps pounded behind us. The street stretched endlessly before me, the woods a blur to my left, the streetlights flickering as if they too felt the danger. I could hear him, his breath heavy, his steps closing the gap, his voice a growl. "You can't run from me." My lungs burned, my legs aching, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. The image of his glinting eyes burned into my mind. I thought of my father, his stories of the woods, his warnings about the things that lived in the dark, and wished I'd listened. Wished I'd stayed home that night. The man was faster than I expected, his bulk no hindrance, his determination a force. I couldn't outrun. I glanced back and he was closer, his face a mask of rage, his hands outstretched as if to grab me, to claim me and my dog for whatever purpose drove him. I pushed harder, my dog's leash slipping in my sweaty grip, his barks a desperate plea. As we rounded a corner, the woods fell away, replaced by the glow of a busy street, a main road lined with shops and cars, their lights a beacon in the dark. I ran toward the crowd, weaving through parked cars, my dog panting beside me, his fur brushing my leg like a lifeline. I reached the sidewalk, the hum of voices and engines a shield, and turned to look back. The man had stopped at the edge of the street, his silhouette framed against the woods, his eyes still glinting, his chest heaving with exertion. He didn't follow, but his gaze held mine, a promise of something unfinished, a threat that lingered in the air like smoke. I collapsed against a lamppost, my dog pressing against my legs, his body trembling as much as mine. The crowd moved around us, oblivious to the terror I'd escaped, their laughter a stark contrast to the fear that gripped me. I stayed there for an hour, watching the woods, waiting for him to emerge, but he didn't, his presence a shadow that clung to my mind. When I finally walked home, I took the long way, sticking to the main roads, my dog's leash tight in my hand, my eyes darting to every shadow, every rustle. I locked the doors that night, checked the windows, my father's warnings echoing in my ears, his voice a ghost that couldn't protect me now. The next day, I spoke to a neighbor, an old man who'd lived here for decades, his eyes sharp with the wisdom of years. He told me stories of the woods, of men who'd vanished into them, of whispers heard at night, of a figure who hunted those who walked alone. He called him the Wanderer, a myth born from tragedy, a man who'd lost everything and became something else, something that craved what he couldn't have. The stories chilled me, but they offered no comfort, only a name for the terror that had chased me. I stopped walking my dog at night, my evenings spent indoors, the woods a forbidden place, their shadows a reminder of what I'd escaped. Now, months later, I still feel him, his glinting eyes a scar on my memory, flashing in every shadow, every quiet night. My dog senses it too, his ears perking at sounds I can't hear, his body tensing as if he knows the wanderer is still out there, waiting. The town whispers now of others who've seen him, a man in the woods, his voice a lure, his rage a promise of violence. What did he want with my dog, with me, and why did he choose us? I ask you because I'm lost in this nightmare, do you know? The ring notification buzzed on my phone, a sharp jolt in the quiet of my apartment, and when I opened the app, I saw them. 2 men standing outside my door, their faces caught in the grainy glow of the camera. It was nearly 8:12 p.m. The sky, outside a deepening gray, and their presence felt like a violation, a crack in the safety I'd built around myself. My dog growled, low and tense, as 3 rapid knocks echoed through the room, each one a hammer against my nerves. I froze, my heart racing, the air suddenly cold with a dread I couldn't name. I'm 22, a young woman living alone for the first time in a brand new apartment complex on the safe side of town. The city I call home has always felt secure, its streets lined with tidy shops and well-lit parks, a place where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But even in this sanctuary, I'd taken precautions, installing a Ring video doorbell to guard against the unknown. For the 6 months I'd lived here, it had been a silent sentinel, never needed, never triggered by anything more than a neighbor passing by. That is, until that night in May 2025, when the ordinary rhythm of my evening shattered. I was curled up on my couch, my dog nestled beside me, a textbook open on my lap as I worked through a pile of homework. The apartment was a cozy haven, soft, lamplight casting a warm glow over the cream-colored walls, the faint hum of the heater blending with the distant murmur of traffic outside. But as the clock ticked closer to 8 p.m., the darkness beyond my windows deepened, a creeping shadow that seemed to press against the glass. The Ring alert came first, a notification of motion at my door, but I brushed it off. At this hour, people still roamed the halls, neighbors heading to dinner, maintenance workers finishing their rounds. I'd set the system to detect any person outside my door at night, a precaution that now felt both comforting and ominous. 30 seconds later, the knocks came, 3 loud, insistent bangs that made my dog leap up, his growl turning into a frantic bark. My stomach twisted, a knot of unease tightening as I opened the Ring app, the live feed showing 2 men standing just beyond my door. They were tall, their faces shadowed under the hallway's dim lights, one holding a clipboard, the other staring directly at the camera with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I debated ignoring them, my fingers hovering over the phone, but the sky wasn't fully dark yet, and I knew my neighbors were home. It felt safe enough to crack the door, just enough to see what they wanted. I opened the door a sliver, my head poking out, my dog's barks echoing behind me. The man closest to me smiled, a thin, practiced grin that didn't reach his eyes. "We're with the Wealth Committee," he said, his voice smooth, too smooth, as he nodded at the wreath on my door. Nice wreath, by the way. Before I could respond, he shifted gears, claiming they were from an internet company here to offer me a deal. My instincts prickled. Something was off. My apartment complex had a strict no solicitation policy, signs posted everywhere, a rule we were told to enforce by reporting any violators immediately. I told them I was happy with my current service, not interested. But the man pressed on, his words relentless. He spoke of the great deal they could offer, how he lived nearby and could personally set up the service, even offering to come inside right then to get me started. His partner stood silent, his gaze fixed on me, unblinking, a predator's stare that made my skin crawl. I declined again, firmer this time, but he wouldn't let up, insisting I was missing out, that he could be back in 5 minutes if I changed my mind. He handed me a business card, his fingers brushing mine for a moment too long, and I tried to end the conversation, my voice tight with unease. Feel the unease creeping in, don't you? The thought whispered in my mind as he kept talking, refusing to leave, his persistence a weight pressing against my chest. Finally, I took a more assertive stance, asking if he was aware of the no solicitation policy. He claimed he'd cleared it with management, mentioning Mike and Will on the golf cart, calling Mike a great guy. My blood ran cold. I knew every member of our small management team, all women with the only man being Joe, a maintenance worker. There was no Mike, no Will, and the lie hung heavy in the air, a confirmation of my growing fear. I muttered a quick, "Thanks, but I'm not interested," slammed the door and locked it, the sound loud in the sudden silence. I examined the business card, my hands trembling. It had a logo and the name he'd given, but the email was a Yahoo account, not a company domain, and the phone number didn't match any internet provider when I searched it. My dog paced, still on edge, as I posted about the encounter on our residents-only Facebook page. Within minutes, other women replied. Emily. From upstairs, Rachel across the hall, sharing similar experiences from that night. They'd been approached too, given different names, offered different deals, but always the same pattern. Only women were targeted, never the men or couples on our floor. Some were told the men had no business cards, a detail that didn't match my experience, adding to the inconsistency. I Googled the name on the card, my heart sinking as the second result revealed a report from an offender registry. The man who'd spoken to me had 5 felonies: trafficking a controlled substance, theft by deception, possession of stolen property, and had served years in jail. A photo confirmed it was him, his parole extending until November 2025. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just a scam. I'd heard whispers in the complex before, rumors shared over coffee in the lobby, stories of suspicious visitors, of women feeling watched in the parking lot, of incidents swept under the rug because the area was safe. But now, with that man's face burned into my memory, those whispers felt like warnings I'd ignored. I reported the incident to our property manager, Ms. Carter, who promised to investigate, her voice tense with concern. Nothing else suspicious has happened since, thank goodness, and I'm safe for now. But the unease lingers, a shadow that follows me through my once secure home. I can't shake the feeling that they weren't just scammers, that they might have been staking out my apartment, planning a robbery or something far worse. If they return, I won't hesitate to call the police, my finger already hovering over the emergency dial. I've learned a hard lesson. Even in the safest places, danger can find you. Stay vigilant out there, because I know I will. The house was a cradle of memories, its walls whispering tales of my childhood, but in its shadows, something else whispered, a visitor that didn't belong. In 2016, I was 27, a single father to my 4-year-old son, Ethan, living in the small house in rural Georgia I'd inherited from my parents after my mother's passing. The house was a modest relic, its wooden floors creaking with every step, its paint peeling in strips like old skin, the air heavy with the scent of aged timber and the faint lavender of my mother's perfume, still clinging to the curtains. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a sanctuary for us, but sanctuaries don't harbor nightmares. The town was quiet, a sleepy cluster of homes surrounded by fields and woods, where the loudest sound was the rustle of leaves in the wind, the kind of place where peace felt like a promise. But a few months after we moved in, that promise began to crack. Lights flickered in patterns that defied the old wiring I blamed, their glow stuttering like a heartbeat in the dark. Footsteps echoed in the hallway at night, a soft, deliberate tread that stopped when I opened my door. The silence that followed heavier than the sound. Ethan started talking about a little person, watching him play in the living room, his small voice bright with wonder, his finger pointing to corners where I saw only shadows. Kids imagine things, I told myself, brushing off the chill that crept up my spine. But the house felt different, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to notice. One night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, the air in his room was thick, the nightlight casting a faint orange glow that danced on the walls, illuminating his stuffed animals in a soft, eerie halo. I pulled the blanket up to his chin, his small hand clutching mine, his eyes wide with the innocence only a child can hold. "Daddy, look, it's the fairy," he whispered, pointing to the corner near the closet, where the shadows seemed to deepen, pooling like ink. I turned, humoring him, expecting nothing but the familiar shapes of his toys. The closet door ajar as always, its hinges rusted and stubborn. There was nothing, just the nightlight's glow, the shadows shifting as a breeze slipped through the cracked window. "It's just your imagination, buddy," I said, my voice steady but my heart uneasy, a faint prickle of doubt at the edge of my mind. "Go to sleep." I kissed his forehead, his hair soft against my lips, and turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob. Then I heard it, a soft stirring sound, like leaves brushing against each other coming from that corner. I froze, my breath catching, and flipped on the light, the bulb flickering before steadying, bathing the room in a harsh glare. I checked the closet, its depths cluttered with toys and clothes, but empty of anything alive. Nothing, I told myself, turning off the light, the darkness rushing back like a tide. But the sound lingered in my mind, a whisper of something I couldn't explain. The next morning, Ethan burst into my room, his small feet pattering on the hardwood, his face alight with excitement. "Daddy, the fairy came back last night, and she played with me," he chirped, his voice a melody of joy that clashed with the unease growing in my chest. I knelt to his level, my hands on his shoulders, and asked what he meant, my voice gentle but my pulse quickening. His words were a child's dream, but they felt like a warning. He described a tiny figure, about a foot tall, with wings that shimmered like glass, floating around his room in a dance of light. She'd sat on his bed, her voice like the chime of bells, soft and musical, telling him she lived in our house too, a secret roommate he welcomed with open arms. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair, and said, "That sounds like a fun dream, buddy." But inside, I was unraveling, the innocence of his words tainted by a growing dread. What if it wasn't a dream? The house seemed to shift around me, the walls leaning in, the air heavier, as if it knew something I didn't, as if it were guarding a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the morning routine. Pancakes sizzling on the griddle, Ethan's laughter filling the kitchen. But the fairy's chime echoed in my thoughts, a melody that felt more like a lure than a song. A few nights later, I sat in the living room, the TV casting a flickering blue glow across the worn couch, the hum of a late-night show, a comforting drone against the quiet. The house was still, the kind of stillness that feels alive, its silence a canvas for every creak, every sigh of the old wood. Then I heard it again, a soft stirring sound, this time from the kitchen. I muted the TV, my heart thudding, the noise too deliberate, too purposeful to be a mouse or the house settling. I stood, my bare feet cold against the floor, and crept toward the kitchen. The doorway, a shadowed threshold I hesitated to cross. Something's there, I thought, my hand trembling as I flicked on the light, the bulb buzzing to life, illuminating the room in a stark white glow. And there, on the counter, was a sight that stopped my heart. A tiny figure, no taller than a foot, its translucent wings shimmering in the moonlight streaming through the window, catching the light in prisms of color that danced across the walls. It looked like a fairy, but it was wrong, so wrong. Its face was too human, too sharp, its features carved with an unnatural precision, and its eyes, God, its eyes, were vast, unblinking voids, black as the night outside, staring at me with a depth that stripped me bare. It was toying with a clothes hanger, balancing it upright in a way that defied gravity, its small hands moving with a deliberate grace, as if it were playing a game I couldn't understand. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, my body rooted to the spot as those hollow eyes locked onto mine. A wave of dread washed over me, cold and suffocating, as if I were staring into something I was never meant to see, something that belonged to a world beyond my own. The fairy's gaze was a weight, pressing against my chest, whispering of secrets too ancient, too dark for me to grasp. "Run!" my mind screamed, but I was paralyzed, caught in its stare, the kitchen fading around me, the walls blurring as if reality itself were bending under its presence. Then it vanished, dissolving into the air like a mirage, the hanger clattering, to the counter with a dull thud, the sound snapping me back to the present. My legs gave way and I sank to the floor, my hands trembling, my breath ragged. I haven't seen it since, but Ethan still speaks of the fairy, his voice bright with wonder, saying she visits him in the night, her bell-like voice a song he loves. I've tried to research what it could be. A ghost, a fey creature, something tied to the house's history, but the answers elude me, lost in the shadows of folklore and fear. All I know is it was real, too real, and it wasn't friendly despite Ethan's innocent trust. The house has never felt the same. Its quiet now a mask for something else, a presence that lingers in the corners, watching, waiting. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear a faint chime like bells on the wind, and I know we're never truly alone. The diner was my second home, a greasy spoon on the edge of a sleepy Ohio town where the coffee was bitter and the tips were thin. I was 19, juggling night shifts as a server to pay for community college, my apron stained with ketchup and dreams of something better. The place was a relic of the 80s, checkered floors, vinyl booths, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Most customers were regulars, truckers nursing black coffee, teens sharing milkshakes, the occasional drunk stumbling in from the bar next door. But that night, just past 10 p.m., the air felt different, heavy with a tension I couldn't name. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the half-empty tables, and the smell of fried onions clung to everything, sharp and inescapable. I was wiping down the counter, my hands moving on autopilot, when the bell above, the door jingled. A man walked in, his presence like a shadow passing over the sun. He was tall, his frame swallowed by a worn gray coat, his face half hidden under a baseball cap pulled low. Beside him was a boy, maybe 7, his eyes wide and hollow, clutching a tattered backpack as if it were a lifeline. The man's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, too tight, too deliberate. Something's off, my gut whispered, but I pushed it down, pasting on my server's smile. "Welcome in," I said, my voice brighter than I felt. "Booth okay?" The man nodded, his eyes flicking over me, cold and calculating, before leading the boy to table 6, tucked in the corner by a window streaked with rain. As I handed them, "Menus." The boy stared at the table, his small hands trembling, his face pale under the diner's harsh light. The man ordered without looking up. A burger for himself, nothing for the kid. "He's not hungry," he said, his voice low, clipped, like a door slamming shut. The boy flinched, his eyes darting to the man, then back to the table, silent and still. My stomach twisted, a knot of unease tightening with every second. "Say something," my mind urged, an embedded command I ignored, scribbling the order with a shaking hand. I walked back to the kitchen, the man's gaze burning into my back, the boy's silence louder than any cry. The diner felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the hum of the lights a relentless drone. I watched them from behind the counter, my heart pounding as the man leaned close to the boy, whispering something that made the kid shrink deeper into the booth. The boy's eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, wide and pleading, and I swear I saw fear so raw it stole my breath. I wanted to march over, demand answers, but the other tables needed me. Coffee refills, a spilled soda, a check for table 3. Each task felt like a betrayal, pulling me from the boy who needed me more. When I brought the burger, the man was slouched, picking at his fries, his eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. The boy hadn't moved, his backpack clutched tighter, his gaze fixed on the table's chipped formica. I set the plate down, my voice unsteady. "Anything else?" The man shook his head, but as I turned away, I saw the boy slip a folded napkin. Under his plate, his movements quick, desperate. My pulse spiked, a warning I couldn't ignore. "Check it," my mind commanded. But I kept walking, the diner's noise swallowing my courage. They left 20 minutes later, the man's hand gripping the boy's arm, pulling him into the rainy night. The bell jingled, and they were gone, leaving table 6 empty, the air colder than before. I cleared the dishes, my hands trembling, and found the napkin, tucked beneath a ketchup-smeared plate. My breath caught as I unfolded it. The boy's shaky handwriting scrawled in blue crayon. "Help. He's not my dad." Below it, in a heavier, angrier script, was a single word. "Don't." My heart stopped, the world tilting as the words burned into my mind. The man's handwriting, a threat, a promise of something unthinkable. I ran to the manager, my voice breaking as I showed her the note. She called the police, but they arrived too late. The rain-soaked streets empty. No trace of the man or the boy. I stood by table 6, the napkin clutched in my hand. The boy's eyes haunting me. His plea a weight I couldn't carry. I told my sister later, my words spilling out in a rush, and she went pale, her hand covering her mouth. She'd heard a story years ago, a nested tale from a co-worker about a girl who'd seen a child in a diner, silent and scared, with a man who wasn't her father. She didn't act, my sister said, her voice trembling, and they never found her. That story anchored me now, making the boy's note feel not just real, but fated, a cry I'd failed to answer. The diner hasn't felt safe since. Every late shift, I scan the faces, searching for that boy, his backpack, his fear. The jukebox stays silent, the lights buzz louder, and table 6 remains empty, its surface a canvas for a note I'll never forget. I keep it in my wallet, the crayon faded but the words sharp. A reminder of the night I saw danger and did nothing. Some horrors don't scream or strike. They sit quietly at your table, leaving a note that changes you forever, a shadow you can't outrun. It was a slow evening in the small-town diner where I'd worked for years. The kind of place where the jukebox played old country tunes and the regulars knew your name. I was just a waitress, pouring coffee and taking orders until a man and a young girl sat at table 9, their presence a shadow that darkened the room. This is the story of the man who didn't belong, the girl who needed saving, and the note that haunts me to this day. The diner was my second home, a quaint spot on the edge of a sleepy town, its red vinyl booths and checkered floors a throwback to simpler times. I'd been working there for 5 years since I was 18, saving tips to one day leave this place, to chase dreams the town couldn't hold. The regulars were a comfort, old Mr. Thompson with his black coffee, the high school kids sharing milkshakes after games, the truckers passing through with stories of the road. On slow nights like this, the jukebox hummed softly, its melodies a backdrop to the clink of dishes and the murmur of voices, the air warm with the scent of fried onions and apple pie. I loved the rhythm of it, the predictability, the way I could move through the tables with a smile, knowing exactly what each customer needed before they asked. But that night, the rhythm broke, the air turning heavy, as if the diner itself sensed the danger that walked through the door. It was just past 7 when they came in, the bell above the door jingling with a sound that felt too loud in the quiet. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped inside, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. He wore a faded jacket, its sleeves stained with dirt, his face shadowed by a baseball cap pulled low, but his eyes, sharp, darting, glinting, with something I couldn't name, caught the light and held it, a predator's gaze in a room of prey. Beside him was a little girl, no more than 7, her small hand swallowed by his grip. She was pale, her blonde hair tangled, her blue eyes wide but dull, as if the light inside her had been snuffed out. She wore a faded dress, too big for her frame, its hem frayed, her sneakers scuffed and untied, as if she'd been dragged through the world without care. They sat at table 9, a corner booth by the window, the man pulling her close, his arm around her shoulders, a cage she couldn't escape. I approached with my notepad, my smile automatic, but my stomach twisted. A feeling I couldn't shake. "Welcome in," I said, my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. "What can I get you?" The man didn't look at me, his eyes scanning the diner, the door, the windows, as if expecting someone to burst through. "Coffee," he grunted, his voice low, rough, the kind of sound that scraped against your skin. "And a milkshake for her." The girl didn't speak, didn't look up, her hands folded in her lap, her body rigid, as if she'd been taught to be invisible. I nodded, scribbling the order, but my eyes lingered on her, searching for a sign, a spark, anything to tell me she was okay. She gave me nothing, her silence a wall I couldn't breach, but the man's tension was a storm crackling in the air around them. As I brought their order, I watched them, my instincts screaming that something was wrong, terribly wrong. That tried. Man sipped his coffee, his movements jerky, his eyes never still, darting to every sound. The jukebox skipping, a fork clattering, the bell as another customer left. He leaned close to the girl, whispering something I couldn't hear, his tone sharp, his hand tightening on her shoulder until she flinched, a small movement that broke my heart. She didn't touch her milkshake, her hands still in her lap, her gaze fixed on the table, as if looking up might cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. I tried to catch her eye, to offer a smile, a moment of warmth, but she wouldn't look at me, her face a mask of fear I couldn't pierce. The man noticed my attention, his head snapping toward me, his eyes narrowing, a warning that made my blood run cold. I turned away, my hands trembling as I wiped down the counter, my mind racing with questions I didn't dare ask. The diner felt different now, its warmth a lie, its light too dim to banish the shadow at table 9. I kept them in the corner of my eye, pretending to work, my heart pounding with each passing minute. The regulars didn't notice, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension coiling in my chest. But I saw everything. The way he gripped her arm, the way she shrank into herself, the way his voice hissed when he spoke, too low for me to hear but sharp enough to cut. I thought of calling someone, the manager, the police. But what would I say? He hadn't done anything. Not yet. But the air around him was a storm. A promise of something terrible waiting to unfold. I remembered stories from the town, whispers of missing girls, of men who came and went in the night, their faces forgotten, but their crimes etched into the earth. I'd dismissed them as rumors, the kind of tales small towns tell to scare themselves. But now they felt real, a truth I couldn't ignore. They finished quickly, the man tossing a crumpled bill on the table. His movements hurried as if he sensed the net closing in. He stood, pulling the girl to her feet, her body limp, her eyes still fixed on the floor. A doll in the hands of a monster. I approached to clear the table, my hands shaking, my voice caught in my throat. But then I saw it, a note scrawled on, the receipt in a child's shaky hand. Not my dad. The words hit me like a blow, a silent scream that echoed in my mind, a plea I hadn't heard until it was too late. My heart stopped, the world narrowing to those 3 words, their meaning, a knife that cut through my hesitation. I looked up, but they were already at the door, the man's hand on her neck, guiding her out into the night, her small form swallowed by the darkness beyond the glass. I ran to the window, my hands pressed against the cold pane, watching as they disappeared into the parking lot, the man's silhouette a looming threat against the streetlights. I should have called out, should have stopped them, but fear held me back, a coward's choice that I'd regret for the rest of my life. I grabbed the receipt. The note crumpled in my hand and ran to the phone, dialing the police with trembling fingers, my voice breaking as I told them what I'd seen. They promised to send a car, to check the area, but I knew it was too late. The man and the girl already gone, vanished into the night like ghosts. I stood there, the diner empty now, the jukebox silent, the air heavy with the weight of my failure, the note a burning reminder of what I'd lost. The town searched for days, flyers with the girl's description pinned to every pole, her face, a haunting echo of the child I'd failed. The police found nothing, no trace of the man, no record of the girl, just a void where they'd been, a mystery that tore at the town's heart. I learned later of others who'd seen them, a gas station, clerk, a motel owner, their stories mirroring mine, a trail of fear that led nowhere. The diner became a place of whispers, the regulars speaking in hushed tones, their eyes darting to table 9 as if it held the answers we couldn't find. I quit soon after, unable to face the booth, the memory of her eyes, the weight of those 3 words that changed everything. Now, years later, I still see her face, her pale skin, her tangled hair, her silent plea etched into my soul. I walk past the diner sometimes, its lights dim, its windows reflecting a past I can't escape, and I wonder if she's out there, if she's safe, if someone heard her cry before it was too late. The town whispers of others, girls taken in. The night, men who vanish into the dark, a cycle of loss that never ends. What happened to that little girl, and why didn't I act? I ask you because I'm lost in this nightmare. Do you know? The street stretched like a vein through the sleeping suburb, its silence a fragile shield that shattered under the low growl of an engine behind me. It was past midnight 2 years ago, the air thick with the chill of a moonless night. And I was walking home from a friend's house, my sneakers scuffing the gravel, unaware that the darkness had eyes. A white van emerged from the shadows, its headlights slicing through the quiet, pinning my silhouette to the pavement, stretching it into something frail and hunted, a warning I didn't yet grasp. The neighborhood was a patchwork of tidy lawns and shuttered homes, its familiarity a comfort I'd never questioned. I'd made this walk countless times, the streetlight's orange glow guiding me through the maze of cul-de-sacs. That night the air clung to my skin, sharp and damp, and I tugged my jacket tighter, my breath clouding in the cold. Have you ever felt the night turn predator, its silence masking a threat you can't see? Halfway home I noticed the van, white, unmarked, its engine a soft snarl as it crept behind me, too deliberate to be aimless. At first I told myself it was a lost driver, someone searching for a house number, so I kept walking, my pace steady, my eyes fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk. But the van didn't pass. It lingered 20 feet back, its headlights a relentless spotlight, casting my shadow long and trembling before me. My stomach knotted, a primal instinct whispering that I was no longer alone, that I was being watched. Quickened my steps, the gravel crunching louder under my feet, but the van matched my rhythm, its tires rolling with a slow, predatory grace. My pulse hammered, my hands clenching in my pockets, but I forced my gaze forward, refusing to look back. Don't show fear, I thought, though my heart betrayed me, thudding against my ribs. The van pulled alongside, its passenger window sliding, down with a mechanical hum that cut through the night. A man leaned out, his face half shrouded in shadow, lit only by the dashboard's sickly green glow. His beard was scruffy, his eyes glinting like polished stones, and his voice was too warm, too practiced. "Hey, you need a ride?" he called. "It's late out here." I shook my head, my throat tight, muttering, "No thanks," and kept moving, my sneakers pounding faster now. He didn't stop, his words chasing me like a net. "Come on, it's not safe for a girl alone. We're just trying to help." The driver, a silhouette behind the windshield, watched me, his gaze a cold weight, silent but heavy with intent. The street was a void, no cars, no lights in the windows, no one to hear me scream. Fear can stretch time, turning every step into a battle against the unknown. I broke into a jog, my breath ragged, my jacket flapping against my sides, but the van crept closer, its engine a low growl that vibrated in my chest. The passenger's voice sharpened, its false kindness peeling away. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his tone a veiled threat. "We're not gonna hurt you. Just get in." I glanced back, my heart lurching as I saw the driver's hand on the door handle, fingers twitching, poised to leap out, his eyes barely visible locked on me, unblinking like a hunter sizing up prey. Ahead, the park loomed, its trees swallowed by darkness, a black abyss where help was a distant dream. "Run faster," my mind screamed, but my legs burned, my lungs straining against the cold air. My phone was in my pocket, its weight a faint lifeline, but stopping to call felt like inviting them closer, giving them the moment they needed to strike. I thought of the stories, girls vanishing into the night, white vans at the heart of every warning, and my blood turned to ice, my body driven by a fear so raw it drowned out everything else. The van's headlights grew brighter, their glare blinding as it edged nearer, the gap between us shrinking with every step. The passenger leaned farther out, his voice now a snarl. "Don't make this hard," he said, his words slicing through the night. "Just get in. We'll take you home." The lie was flimsy, his eyes betraying a hunger that had nothing to do with kindness. I veered toward the park, its shadows a desperate gamble, knowing I couldn't outrun them forever. My hand brushed my phone, and in a flash of clarity a plan formed, a fragile thread of hope in the chaos. Lie to live, I thought, yanking the phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I held it high, its blank screen a prop in my defiance. "I'm live on Instagram," I shouted, my voice cracking but fierce, aimed at the van like a weapon. "I've got your faces, your license plate, everything." It was a bluff. My phone locked. My hands too shaky to unlock it, but I poured every ounce of conviction into the words, staring into the passenger's eyes, daring him to call my lie. His face twisted, a curse spitting from his lips, and the driver's hand froze on the door. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath, the van's engine idling, its headlights blinding. Then the driver slammed the gas, the van lurching forward with a roar, tires biting the asphalt as it tore down street. I kept my phone raised, my arm shaking, my eyes fixed on the taillights until they vanished around a corner, swallowed by the night. "Don't stop running," my mind urged, and I sprinted, my lungs searing, checking over my shoulder with every step. The park's darkness a threat I'd barely escaped. When I reached my house, my keys slipped in my sweating hands, the lock stubborn as I fumbled, finally stumbling inside. I bolted every door, my body collapsing against the wall, my breath coming in gasps as the van's hum echoed in my ears. A ghost that wouldn't leave. I called the police, my voice unsteady, recounting the night in fragments. They listened, their voices calm but distant, saying it sounded like an abduction attempt, but without a clear plate number. Their hands were tied. "Be careful," they said, a hollow directive that did nothing to ease the fear coiling in my chest. I haven't walked alone at night since. The streets I once loved, now a labyrinth of unseen dangers. Years later, that night is a scar that burns. I see white vans in daylight, their shapes mundane but menacing, and my pulse spikes, my mind flashing. To that man's glinting eyes, the driver's silent stare, the door handle twitching under his fingers. My neighborhood, once a sanctuary, feels like a betrayal. Its quiet a mask for threats that lurk in the shadows. I wonder what would have happened if my bluff had faltered, if they'd stepped out, their hands closing the distance between us. The fear is a companion now, a weight I carry, a reminder that safety is a fragile illusion, and the night can turn hunter in a heartbeat. The figure stood 50 yards away, a pale, naked silhouette against the fading light of the forest, his emaciated frame glowing like a ghost in the dusk. I froze, my hands slick with blood from the boar I'd just dressed, my heart pounding as his unblinking eyes locked onto mine. I was alone, an hour from the nearest town, deep in a remote hunting ground where no one should be. Yet there he was, a man who didn't belong, his presence a violation of the natural order. And then he spoke, mimicking my voice in a high-pitched, feminine tone that sent a chill down my spine. I've been hunting wild boars for a decade, drawn to the solitude of the woods, the thrill of the chase. My favorite spot is a remote stretch of forest, an hour from the nearest town, accessible only by a 40-minute drive down a winding dirt road that cuts through dense pines and shadowed underbrush. The isolation is part of the appeal. No distractions, just me and the hunt. Usually I go with my best friend from high school, but that evening, around 2015 if I had to guess, I decided to go alone. It was just after 6 p.m. The sun already dipped below the horizon, leaving a faint twilight glow that bathed the forest in hues of gray and gold. I didn't need my flashlight yet, the light enough to see the outlines of trees, their branches, swaying in the cool evening breeze. I'd just taken down a boar, a clean shot, and was kneeling beside it, my knife slicing through flesh as I dressed the kill. the air sharp with the scent of blood and pine. A noise broke the stillness, a rustle, too deliberate to be the wind coming from the trees behind me. I turned, my senses heightened but saw nothing. Just the endless stretch of forest, its shadows lengthening as dusk deepened. I shook it off, returning to my work, the rhythmic scrape of my knife a grounding sound in the quiet. But a minute later the noise came again, closer now from my left. My head snapped toward the sound, and that's when I saw him. A naked man standing 50 yards away, his skin so pale it seemed to glow, his body gaunt, ribs protruding like a skeleton draped in flesh. Alarm bells screamed in my mind. This was the middle of nowhere, 40 minutes from the nearest road, an hour from civilization. Who could be here, and why was he naked? I stood slowly, my movements cautious, trying not to provoke him. "Hey, do you need help?" I called, my deep voice echoing through the trees. He didn't respond, just stared, his eyes unblinking, hollow, as if they could see through me. I called again, louder, but this time he answered, not with words of his own, but with mine. His voice a high-pitched feminine mockery of my own. "Do you need any help? Hey, are you okay?" He parroted, the sound so unnatural it sent a jolt of fear through me. He took a step forward, then another, his movements slow, deliberate, his emaciated frame swaying as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. "Hear the voice echoing, don't you?" The thought came unbidden, a whisper of dread as he kept mimicking me, his voice a chilling distortion that clawed at my nerves. I grabbed my rifle from where it leaned against a nearby tree, my hands trembling, as I shouted, "Stop right there! Who are you?" But he didn't stop. Instead, he dropped to all fours, his body contorting in a way no human should, and charged at me, still mimicking my voice, now mixed with guttural, animalistic growls that echoed through the forest like a predator's call. I fired a warning shot into the ground, the crack of the rifle sharp in the twilight, hoping to scare him off. He didn't flinch, didn't slow, his pale form hurtling toward me on all fours, his movements jerky, unnatural, like a beast wearing a man's skin. Panic surged and I turned, sprinting toward my truck 100 yards away, my boots pounding the forest floor, branches snapping underfoot. His voice chased me, a haunting echo. "Do you need any help?" mingled with snarls that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. My lungs burned, my heart a frantic drumbeat as I reached the truck, fumbling with the door, diving inside and locking it with a trembling hand. I started the engine, my eyes darting to the window. He was there, 20 yards away, standing upright again, staring at me with those hollow eyes, his pale skin almost luminescent in the dim light. I floored the gas, the truck lurching down the dirt road, my pulse racing as I drove, not stopping until I reached the nearest town. In town, I called my friend Travis, my voice shaking as I recounted the encounter. He listened, then suggested, it might have been a Wendigo or skinwalker, creatures from folklore known for mimicking voices and animalistic behavior. I'd heard the stories, tales told around campfires about spirits that haunted these woods, born of hunger and darkness, preying on those who ventured too far. I'd always dismissed them as myths, but now, after seeing that thing, I wasn't so sure. I researched later, learning of Wendigos, cannibalistic spirits tied to starvation, and skinwalkers, shapeshifters who could mimic voices to lure victims. The descriptions fit too well, and the thought sent a shiver down my spine. I haven't returned to that spot since, and I don't plan to. I still hunt, but never alone, and always in daylight. The memory of that voice, that pale figure, a scar on my mind that refuses to fade. The mountains stretched before me, a canvas of wild beauty, but on that ridge beauty turned to terror. and I became the hunted. I've been an avid hiker for years. The trails of the Pacific Northwest, my sanctuary. Their paths a map of freedom etched into my soul. In late summer 2018, I set out for Olympic National Forest in Washington. A place of raw, untamed splendor. Its peaks and valleys a call I couldn't resist. With me was my 3-year-old German shepherd, Luna, my constant companion on these journeys. Her eager barks a melody against the forest's quiet. We were a team, fearless in the face of nature's challenges, but some challenges aren't natural. We started early, the dawn light painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, our boots crunching on the gravel of the High Divide Loop trailhead, an 18-mile round trip with steep elevation gains that promised both struggle and reward. The trail was a gallery of wonders, alpine meadows bursting with wildflowers, their scent sweet in the air. Dense forests of cedar and fir, their needles soft underfoot. Glacier-fed lakes shimmering like mirrors, their waters a cold, crystalline blue. Luna bounded ahead, her tail wagging, her nose to the ground, chasing scents I couldn't fathom. Her joy a mirror to my own as we climbed higher, the world falling away beneath us. By mid-afternoon, we reached the highest point on the trail, a ridge that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding mountains, Mount Olympus looming in the distance, its snow-capped peak a silent sentinel against the sky. I felt invincible, the king of this wild kingdom. I dropped my pack, the weight of it a relief off my shoulders, and sat on a flat rock, the stone warm from the sun, the air crisp with the tang of pine and earth. Luna settled beside me, her head resting on my knee, her eyes half closed as I unpacked lunch, a sandwich, an apple, a handful of trail mix, the simple fare of a hiker's life. We ate in silence, the only sounds the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of a hawk, the steady rhythm of our breaths. It was perfect until it wasn't. Luna suddenly perked up, her ears forward, her body tense, her gaze fixed down the trail we'd come from, a low rumble starting deep in her throat. I followed her stare, squinting against the sun's glare, my hand shielding my eyes as I searched the path below. Nothing, I thought at first. The trail empty, the meadows still. But then I saw it. A figure in the distance, maybe a quarter mile away, moving up the trail toward us. A dark silhouette against the golden grass. At first I assumed it was another hiker, a common sight on these trails. But as the figure drew closer, a knot of unease tightened in my gut. Luna's rumble grew louder, a deep primal warning that echoed across the ridge, her hackles rising, her body poised as if ready to strike. She never does this, I thought, my heart quickening. Luna's usual friendliness with strangers replaced by a ferocity I'd rarely seen. The figure moved fast, too fast for the steep incline, their pace unnatural, their large backpack swaying with each step, a burden that should have slowed them but didn't. As they closed the distance, I could make out details. A man, dressed, head to toe in camouflage, the kind hunters wear. But this was different. Wrong. His face was obscured, covered in camo paint or a mask, blending seamlessly with his gear, leaving no trace of eyes, no hint of expression, just a blank, featureless void where a face should have been. Who hides like that? I wondered, my unease growing into a cold dread. The ridge suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable, a stage where we were the only actors, watched by an unseen audience. He stopped, maybe 50 yards away, and stood motionless, statue carved from the forest itself, his camo blending into the trees, the rocks, the earth, as if he were part of it, born from it. He's looking at us, I realized, though I couldn't see his eyes, couldn't see anything human in that blank expanse. But I felt his gaze, a weight that pressed against me, sizing me up, judging me. Luna's low rumble turned to sharp cries, her barks echoing across the ridge, a desperate warning that reverberated through the mountains. Her body straining against the leash, her teeth bared in a ferocious sound I'd never heard from her before. "Hey, nice day for a hike, huh?" I called out, my voice forced, trying to sound friendly to break the tension. But the words felt hollow, swallowed by the vastness around us. He didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, watching. His silence a threat louder than any words. "We're in danger," my instincts screamed. The ridge no longer a vantage point but a trap. The open space a cage with no walls, the mountains a witness to whatever he planned. "Move now," I commanded myself, my hands shaking as I grabbed my pack, the strap slipping in my sweaty grip, my lunch forgotten on the rock. I shortened Luna's leash, her cries a frantic rhythm as I started down the trail in the opposite direction, moving as fast as I could without breaking into a run, my boots slipping on loose gravel, my breath ragged in my chest. I kept looking back, my neck aching with the strain. And every time I did, he was still there, standing on the ridge, a faceless sentinel watching us descend, his stillness more terrifying than pursuit. "He's not following," I told myself. But the thought brought no comfort, the distance between us a fragile shield that could shatter at any moment. We hiked another 5 miles, the trail winding through dense forest, the trees closing in like a protective shroud, their shadows a refuge I clung to. I stopped only when my legs burned, my lungs aching. Luna still on edge, her ears twitching, her eyes darting back the way we'd come. He's gone, I thought. The ridge out of sight, the man a memory. But the forest felt different, alive with a presence I couldn't name. Its beauty now a mask for something darker. When we reached the trailhead, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the parking lot, my car a beacon of safety I'd never been so grateful to see. I was exhausted, my body trembling, with adrenaline's aftershock, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd escaped something terrible, something that had seen us, marked us. What was he? The question haunted me as I drove home. Luna curled in the back seat, her whimpers a quiet echo of the fear we'd shared. I started researching that night, my laptop screen a harsh glow in the dark, my fingers typing Olympic, National Forest encounters with a desperation I couldn't quell. What I found chilled me. Stories of a camouflaged man on the trails, always alone, always watching, never speaking. His presence a threat that lingered in hikers' minds. Some felt hunted, their dogs reacting with the same terror Luna had shown, barking, snarling, as if they sensed something human eyes couldn't. One report mentioned strange symbols carved into trees near sightings, though I'd seen no such marks. The idea of them a shadow that deepened my fear. Was he human? A strange hiker with a twisted hobby? Or something else, something born of the forest's ancient heart? A guardian, a predator, a spirit that hunted those who dared its domain. Years later, that day still clings to me, a scar on my memory. I still hike in Olympic National Forest, the call of the wild too strong to resist. But I avoid the high divide loop, its ridge a boundary I'll never cross again. Luna is always with me, her presence a comfort, a warning, her instincts sharper than mine, her loyalty a shield against the unknown. But I can't forget him, the faceless man, standing on the ridge, watching, waiting. Sometimes in the quiet of a new trail, I feel a prickle on my neck, a sense of being watched, and I wonder if he's still out there, hidden in the camo of the forest, waiting for me to return, to finish what he started on that sunlit ridge. The apartment was my fragile sanctuary, a ground floor unit in a weathered complex on the fringes of a small Nevada town. At 26, I was piecing together a solitary life, my days consumed by online classes and late-night shifts at a gas station. The building hugged the highway, its constant hum a restless undercurrent, the asphalt stretching into the desert's endless twilight. Evening walks had become my ritual, tracing the cracked sidewalks under the fading sun, each step a tether to normalcy. But lately the air had thickened with unease, shadows lingering where they shouldn't, headlights flickering in corners of my vision. Just your imagination, I told myself, but my fingers tightened around my keys, their jagged edges a silent promise of defense. It was a cool September evening in 2022, the sky bruised with hues of violet and ash, the air sharp with the scent of sagebrush and dry dust. I was half a mile from home, the highway's distant roar mingling with the crunch of gravel beneath my sneakers. The street was deserted, the sodium streetlights casting sickly yellow pools, their faint buzz a pulse in the gathering dark. My breath was steady, my thoughts drifting, when a white catering truck rolled into view, its engine idling low, its side marred with grime and faded lettering. It stopped at the curb, too close, its headlights pinning me like a spotlight on a stage. My heart lurched, a cold prickle crawling up my spine. Keep walking, my mind commanded. An embedded command I clung to, but my legs felt anchored, the air heavy with an unspoken threat. The driver's door swung open, and a man stepped out, wiry and hunched, his face half hidden under a frayed cap. "Hey, you know where Route 50 is?" he called, his voice oily, too smooth, like a predator masking its claws. His smile was wide, but his eyes were cold, glinting under the streetlight, scanning me with a hunger that turned my stomach. I forced a nod, my throat tight, pointing vaguely down the road. "Few blocks that way," I said, my voice barely steady, my instincts screaming to flee. He didn't move, his smile fixed, and then he gestured to the truck's open door. "Hop, and I'll give you a lift. Easier to show me." The words were casual, but they landed like a blade, each syllable tightening the knot in my gut. My hand closed around my keys, their metal biting into my palm. "I'm good, thanks," I said, stepping back, my pulse hammering like a drum. His smile faltered, a flicker of something darker, anger, calculation crossing his face. "Suit yourself," he muttered, but he didn't return to the truck. He stood, watching, his silhouette a stain against the twilight. "Run," my mind screamed, and I obeyed. Turning away, my steps fast but controlled, refusing to show the fear clawing at my chest. The truck's engine growled behind me, idling, waiting, its headlights burning into my back like a predator's gaze. I didn't look, didn't stop, my breath ragged as I pushed toward the apartment. The deadbolts click a lifeline when I finally locked the door. Inside, the room was dim, the hum of the fridge a feeble anchor to safety. My hands trembled, sweat beading on my forehead as I sank onto the couch, the man's eyes replaying in my mind. Cold, predatory, alive with intent. I called the police, my voice shaking as I described the truck, the man, the way his smile had curdled into something vile. The officer's tone sharpened when I mentioned the catering logo, a detail I'd barely noticed. "Stay inside," he said, his words clipped, and the line went dead. Hours later, a detective called, his voice heavy with urgency. The truck matched one linked to a human trafficking ring, its driver a known predator who lured victims with promises of rides or jobs. They hadn't caught him, but my description was a piece of the puzzle, a small victory that felt like ash in my mouth. I told my coworker Rachel the next day, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. She went pale, her hand gripping the counter, her eyes wide with recognition. She'd heard a story years ago, a nested tale from a friend who'd escaped a similar trap. A man in a van, a smile too wide, a ride that led to a locked door and a scream cut short. "You're lucky," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. And that story anchored me now, making the truck's shadow feel not just real, but fated. A fate I'd dodged by inches. The memory of those eyes, that smile, haunts me. A ghost that lingers in the quiet, a reminder of how close I came to vanishing. The days after were no kinder. Sleep became a battle. The highways hum a sinister lullaby that kept me awake. My mind replaying the truck's idling growl, the man's glinting eyes. I'd wake to imagined footsteps outside, my heart racing as I checked the locks, the windows, the flimsy blinds that shielded me from the world. One night I swore I saw headlights flicker past. Too slow, too deliberate, their beam grazing my window like a warning. I told my landlord, my voice unsteady, and he installed a second deadbolt, but it wasn't enough. The apartment, once a refuge, felt like a trap, its walls too thin to hold back the night's threats. I stopped walking after dark, trading sidewalks for a treadmill. The desert's open spaces now a maze of unseen dangers. My keys stay in my hand. The deadbolt checked thrice, but the fear clings. A shadow no lock can banish. I keep my phone charged, a police number saved, but every distant engine, every flicker of light, pulls me back to that evening, to the white truck's shadow and the man who waited. Some dangers wear a friendly face lurking on quiet streets, ready to steal you away the moment you trust the night's embrace. Have you ever woken in a house so old it feels alive, its walls whispering secrets in the dark, only to find something has shifted, something that shouldn't have moved? That's what happened to me in a Victorian home where time seemed to stand still until it didn't. It was a quiet autumn 3 years ago in a house my daughter and I had made our own. A place of creaking floors and shadowed corners that held more than memories. One morning, I found her bed, her sanctuary, moved to another room, untouched by human hands. A mystery that turned our home into a prison of fear. This is the story of the house that watched us, the bed that defied reality, and the terror that lingers in its walls. We'd moved into the Victorian house on Elm Street after my divorce, a fresh start for my daughter Lily and me in a small New England town where the air smelled of pine and history. The house was a relic, its gabled roof and stained glass windows a testament to a bygone era, its wood-paneled walls etched with the scars of time. I'd fallen in love with its charm, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaded glass, casting rainbows on the hardwood floors, the way the staircase curved like a spine, leading to rooms filled with secrets. Lily, my 7-year-old, adored her new bedroom, a small space on the second floor with a slanted ceiling, a window seat overlooking the garden, and a bed I'd painted white, its headboard carved with flowers. She decorated it with her drawings, her stuffed animals lining the shelves. A nightlight shaped like a star casting a soft glow that chased away the shadows. I'd watch her sleep, her small form curled under the quilt, her breaths a gentle rhythm that soothed my restless heart, and feel a fleeting peace, a moment where the world was right. The house had its quirks, the kind you expect in a place over a century old, creaking floors that sighed with every step, windows that rattled in the wind, a faint hum in the walls that I dismissed as old pipes. But there were whispers in town, stories I'd heard at the local market, of the family who'd lived here in the 1800s, a mother and daughter like us, their lives cut short by tragedy. The townsfolk spoke of strange happenings, of lights flickering, in empty rooms, of voices heard in the night. but I brushed them off, clinging to the hope of a new beginning. I'd lost too much to believe in ghosts, to let fear take root in a home I'd chosen for its promise of safety. But the house felt alive, its walls watching, its shadows stretching too long as if it held memories it wouldn't share. It began on a chilly October morning, the kind where the air bites your skin and the leaves outside burn red and gold. I woke early, the house silent save for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, its rhythm a heartbeat in the stillness. I went to Lily's room to wake her for school, my slippers soft on the hardwood, but the sight that greeted me stopped. Behold, her bed, the white flower-carved bed that had been her sanctuary, was gone. The room was empty, the quilt trailing on the floor, the nightlight flickering as if struggling to breathe, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place, like damp earth and old roses. My heart pounded. A scream caught in my throat as I called her name, my voice echoing in the emptiness, a mother's fear tearing through the quiet. I found her in the guest room down the hall, a space we rarely used, its door always closed, its air always cold. There she was, asleep on her bed, the same bed that had been in her room the night before, now perfectly placed against the guest room's wall, as if it had always been there. Lily was curled under the quilt, her face peaceful, but the room felt wrong. The shadows too deep, the air too thick, as if something had lingered, something that didn't belong. I shook her awake, my voice trembling. "Lily, how did you get here?" She blinked, confused, her small voice a whisper. "I don't know, Mommy. I went to sleep in my room." Her words were a knife, cutting through my denial, a truth I couldn't grasp. Her bed had moved, untouched by human hands, a violation of reality that turned my blood to ice. I searched the house, my flashlight cutting through the morning gloom, my hands shaking as I checked every door, every window, every lock. The front door was bolted, the windows sealed, the floors unmarked by footprints, no sign of an intruder, no explanation for the impossible. But the air was heavy, a weight pressing against my skin, as if the house itself had shifted, its walls holding a secret it wouldn't share. I ran my fingers along the guest room's floor, searching for scratches, for proof the bed had been dragged. But the wood was pristine, the bed's legs untouched, as if it had been lifted by hands I couldn't see. The scent of damp earth and roses lingered, stronger now, a perfume of something ancient, something that had been here long before us. I tried to rationalize it, to find a reason where none existed. Perhaps Lily had sleepwalked, I told myself, though she'd never done so before, and the bed was too heavy for her small frame to move. Perhaps I'd forgotten, in a haze of exhaustion, that I'd moved it myself, but I knew I hadn't. The memory of tucking her in too vivid, too real. I called a friend, a carpenter who'd worked on old houses, asking if the floors could have shifted, if the bed could have slid on its own, but he laughed, his voice kind but firm. Not a chance. Not in a house that solid. I stood in the guest room, Lily clinging to my side, her small hand trembling in mine, and felt the house watching, its walls closing in, its shadows stretching like fingers to claim us. That night, I moved her bed back to her room, my muscles straining under its weight, my heart pounding with each step. I stayed with her, sleeping on the floor beside her, my hand on her quilt, my eyes darting to every shadow, every creak. The house was silent, but the silence was a lie, a mask over something darker, something that waited in the walls. I dreamed of the family who'd lived here, a mother and daughter, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, their voices whispering my name, their hands reaching for Lily's bed. I woke with a start, the nightlight flickering, the scent of earth and roses filling the room. A presence I couldn't see but felt in my bones. I sought answers, digging into the house's history, the town's secrets, anything to explain the thing that haunted us. The library held records, yellowed pages that spoke of the family who'd lived here in 1875, a mother named Eliza and her daughter Clara, who'd vanished one winter night. Their disappearance a mystery that broke the town. The townsfolk whispered of a pact, a ritual gone wrong, a shadow that lingered in the house moving what shouldn't move, claiming what it couldn't have. They called it the Keeper, a spirit tied to the house, a guardian of its secrets, a force that defied time. The stories chilled me, but they offered no comfort, only a name for the terror that stalked us. We stayed in that house for another year, the Keeper a constant shadow, its presence a weight we couldn't escape. Lily stopped sleeping, her eyes hollow, her laughter gone, her small body trembling at every creak, every whisper. I tried everything, prayers, salt lines, a medium who fled the house in tears, her voice trembling. It's too strong. It wants you. The bed moved again, twice more, each time to a different room. Each time with that scent, that weight, that sense of being watched. I sold the house in the end, leaving everything behind. Furniture, memories, dreams. Anything to escape the thing that wouldn't let us go. We moved to a new town, a modern apartment with bright lights and no shadows. But the fear came with us, a scar on our souls. Now, 3 years later, Lily still wakes in the night, her eyes searching the dark, her voice trembling with the same question. Mommy, is it here? I check the corners, the closets, my heart pounding because I feel it too. A presence that lingers, a shadow that knows our names, its gaze a weight that never lifts. The house on Elm Street stands empty, its windows dark, but the neighbors whisper of lights in the night, of a bed that moves in empty rooms, of a mother and daughter who never left. I've searched for answers, scouring old books, speaking to historians, but the Keeper remains a mystery, a terror tied to our blood. I dream of Eliza and Clara, their faces twisted with sorrow, their voices calling us back, and wake to Lily's screams, her fear a mirror of my own. What was that force? And why did it choose us, I ask you, because I'm lost in this nightmare, do you know? The apartment was a beacon of hope, its sleek walls and soaring ceilings promising a fresh start. But as we settled in, a cold breath seeped from its corners, whispering that we'd never be alone. Last year, my boyfriend and I moved into a city, flat, its modern shine a bargain in a quiet neighborhood. We were electric with joy, free from the chaos of rented rooms. But from the first night, the air carried a weight, heavy and unyielding, as if the space held a memory it refused to release. The lights flickered without cause, their hum a restless pulse, and I felt her, a presence unseen but alive, her gaze weaving through the shadows, waiting for us to notice. The building was a hybrid of eras, its polished floors masking the scars of decades, its tall windows framing the city's restless pulse. We spent our first days unpacking, boxes spilling clothes and dishes, our laughter echoing as we carved out a home. The apartment was spacious, its high ceilings giving it a grandeur that felt almost sacred. But there was a strangeness too, the way the air seemed to cling, the way a door would drift open unprompted. Have you ever walked into a room and felt it recoil, its warmth a mask for something colder? By the fourth night, the quirks grew sharper, the lights dimming in rhythmic bursts, the faint creak of floorboards in empty rooms. I dismissed it as old wiring, a settling building. But the weight in the air thickened, a pressure that pressed against my temples, urging me to look deeper, to see what stirred in the quiet. A week in, I was alone. My boyfriend working the graveyard shift. The apartment cloaked in a stillness that felt too deep, too deliberate. As I stirred a pot in the kitchen, the silence shattered. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, calling my name with a clarity that froze my blood. The spoon slipped from my hand, clattering to the counter, my heart a drum against my ribs. Don't turn around, I thought, but my body betrayed me, spinning toward the hallway's dim expanse. I checked every room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood, peering into closets under furniture, even the absurd corners where no one could hide. Nothing. The apartment was empty, but the air was thick, laced with a faint floral scent, sweet and old, like perfume left by someone long gone. I locked myself in the bedroom, my breath shallow, telling myself it was a neighbor's voice, a trick of thin walls. But the scent lingered, the voice's echo curling in my mind, its tone too personal, too knowing. The disturbances grew bolder, their rhythm a quiet assault. The next evening, as I folded laundry in the living room, footsteps sounded from the hallway, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing just beyond the doorframe. My hands stilled, my pulse racing as I stepped into the corridor, the air heavy with that floral trace now cloying, suffocating. No one was there, but the lights flickered, their hum a taunt in the silence. She's here, I thought, my skin prickling as I scanned the empty space. I started noticing disruptions. My keys moved from the hook to the sink. A mug left on the counter when I'd sworn I'd put it away. The thermostat dialed to freezing, though I'd set it warm. Each was small, a whisper of intrusion, but together, they wove a tapestry of dread, tightening around me with every passing day. What do you do when the night reveals a truth you can't unsee? One night we lay in bed, the room soft with the haze of sleep, when a cold weight settled over me like a hand pressing against my chest. My eyes snapped open, my breath catching, and there she was, a woman, pale as frost, sitting at the foot of our bed. Her hair was long, dark, spilling over her shoulders like ink, her eyes hollow voids, twin pits that seemed to swallow the room's faint light. Her presence was a violation, her gaze a silent claim, and I screamed, my voice tearing through the dark. My boyfriend jolted awake, his hand clutching mine, his face drained of color. I saw her, he whispered, his voice trembling, admitting, the fleeting glimpse of her shape low and still before she vanished. We flooded the room with light, the bulbs harsh but powerless, and sat awake, our backs against the headboard, too terrified to move, her absence heavier than her presence. The apartment became a cage, its walls pulsing with her will. The voice grew relentless, calling my name in the quiet hours, sometimes from the living room, sometimes inches from my ear, its tone shifting from gentle to insistent, as if demanding something I couldn't give. Footsteps echoed nightly, their rhythm a constant threat, pacing the hallway, circling the edges of our lives. We felt her always, watching, waiting, her presence a shadow just beyond sight. Leave now, my mind screamed. But fear rooted us, each night a test of endurance. We slept with every light on, their glare a frail shield, but the shadows deepened, her gaze piercing through. After 2 months we broke, packing in a frenzy, our hands shaking as we sealed boxes. The apartments, air thick with her disapproval. The landlord didn't argue, his silence heavy, as if he'd seen others flee before us. Before leaving, I pressed a neighbor, her voice hushed, for answers. She spoke of a woman, alone, found dead in the apartment years ago, her life snuffed. Out in silence, her story buried in the walls. No details, but the truth was a wound, a confirmation of the shadow we'd faced. She wanted something, I realized. Her voice not just a haunt, but a plea, a claim that lingered in the air we'd breathed. Years later, her echo is a chain I can't break. We've moved to a new place, its bright walls a fragile defense, but some nights I wake, heart pounding, certain I hear her call my name, soft and clear from a darkness I can't name. I avoid old buildings now, their creaking floors and heavy air too close to that cursed flat, where something still waits, its eyes fixed on me, ready to claim what it never had. The humming started as I washed my hands, a low, melodic tune that seemed to seep from the walls of the bathroom. A man's voice, deep and haunting, filling the air with an eerie presence. I froze, the water still running, my heart pounding, as I realized I was alone in the apartment, save for my 3-year-old son in the living room. My husband was at work, the doors were locked, yet the sound was unmistakable, a melody that didn't belong. I turned off the faucet, my breath shallow, and in the silence that followed, I knew something was terribly wrong. I was 6 or 7 months pregnant, my body heavy with the weight of new life, living in a 90s-era apartment complex that had always felt safe, if a little dated. The walls were thin, the carpet worn, but it was home, a cozy space where I spent afternoons playing with my son Oliver, while my husband Nathan worked late shifts. That afternoon, the sun filtered through the living room windows, casting a warm glow over Oliver's scattered toys as he giggled, stacking blocks into a wobbly tower. I smiled, brushing a hand over my swollen belly, but nature called, and I excused myself to the bathroom down the hall. The apartment was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound as I stepped inside, flicking on the light. The bathroom was small, its tiles cracked, the mirror spotted with age, but it was familiar, a space I'd never thought twice about, until that moment. I turned on the faucet, the water cold against my skin, when the humming began, a man's voice weaving a tune I didn't recognize, its notes echoing as if they came from everywhere and nowhere. My hands stilled, the soap slipping from my fingers as I listened, trying to place the sound. It seemed to drift from the living room, where Oliver played, and a surge of panic gripped me. Nathan was at work, and I knew we were alone, or should have been. Feel the humming in your bones, don't you? The thought came unbidden, a whisper of dread as I turned off the water, my heart racing, and hurried back down the hall. Oliver sat on the carpet, his tiny hands clutching a toy car, his laughter bright and unaware. I stood there, watching him, straining to hear the humming again, but it had stopped, leaving only the faint creak of the building settling. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, the fatigue of pregnancy playing tricks on my mind, and returned to the bathroom to finish washing my hands. The air felt heavier as I stepped back inside, the light above the mirror flickering faintly, casting jagged shadows on the walls. I reached for the towel, drying my hands when I saw it, a shadow figure in the doorway, tall at least 6 feet, its form a solid black silhouette, featureless, like a void carved from the light. My breath caught, my pulse spiking as I turned, my head to look directly at it, but it vanished, leaving the doorway empty. My chest tightened, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin, the unease now a tangible weight pressing against me. I moved to leave, my movements hurried, when a pale hand gripped the doorframe, its long fingers stark against the wood, knuckles white with tension. It was a man's hand, unmistakable, the veins prominent, the grip so tight it seemed to anchor something unseen just out of sight. A scream tore from my throat, raw and primal, as I bolted from the bathroom, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my chest. I scooped Oliver into my arms, his toy car clattering to the floor, and ran to the bedroom, slamming the door behind us and locking it with trembling hands. He whimpered, confused as I clutched him close, my breath ragged, my eyes darting to the door, expecting that hand to appear again. I called Nathan, my voice shaking as I recounted the humming, the shadow, the hand, each word spilling out in a rush of terror. He came home immediately, his face pale with worry as he searched the apartment, checking every corner, every closet, but found nothing, no one, no signs of intrusion, nothing out of place. Yet the air felt charged, as if something lingered, just beyond our sight, watching, waiting. I'd heard rumors about the complex before, whispers shared by neighbors over laundry room chats, stories of strange noises, of tenants who'd moved out after unexplained occurrences, of a man who'd lived here years ago, his life ending in tragedy within these walls. I'd dismissed them as gossip, but now, after that day, they felt like warnings I'd ignored. For weeks I refused to be alone in the apartment. The memory of that humming, that shadow, that hand gripping the doorframe haunting my every moment. We moved out not long after, desperate for a fresh start, and I haven't experienced anything like it since. But even now, years later, the thought of it sends chills down my spine, a reminder of the terror I felt, the unshakable certainty that something was in our home that day, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The summer night wrapped around me, warm and familiar, but across that cornfield something waited, something that turned the familiar into a nightmare. At 13, I was a restless kid, the summer stretching before me like an endless adventure, and I spent it at my aunt's house in a remote corner of the countryside, where the world felt untouched by time. Her home was a relic of the 1920s, its weathered boards groaning with age, its big front porch a stage for lazy evenings, its long, gravel driveway crunching underfoot as I explored the surrounding farmland and woods. This was my playground, a place of safety and wonder until it wasn't. The area was isolated with only a handful of neighbors scattered miles apart, the nearest a faint light on the horizon, their lives as distant as the stars. Across the road, a cornfield stretched endlessly, its stalks whispering in the breeze, their shadows swaying like a living thing. The woods beyond a dark, impenetrable wall that held secrets I'd never dared to uncover. I filled my days with exploration, wandering through the trees, their bark rough under my hands, or helping my aunt with chores, feeding the chickens, their feathers soft against my fingers, or tending her garden, the earth rich and damp, the scent of tomatoes and basil heavy in the air. One night everything changed. It was around 9 or 10. The sky a deep indigo, the stars faint pinpricks against the darkness, the air cool with the promise of autumn, carrying the earthy scent of corn and soil. I sat on the front porch with my aunt, her rocking chair creaking. Softly, her voice a gentle hum as we talked about nothing and everything, the kind of conversation that binds you to a moment. Then the night spoke, and it wasn't kind. A sound tore through the stillness, a piercing cry mixed with a deep rumble, high-pitched yet guttural, a noise that didn't belong to any animal I knew, echoing from the cornfield across the road. My aunt and I froze, our eyes meeting, hers, wide with the same confusion and unease that gripped me. The sound a violation of the peace we'd cherished. What was that? I thought, my heart quickening. The porch suddenly feeling exposed. The cornfield a shadowed sea hiding something monstrous. My aunt stood, her face set, and said, "Stay here." Her voice firm but trembling at the edges before disappearing inside to grab a flashlight and her shotgun, her footsteps fading into the house, leaving me alone with the night and that, I stared at the cornfield, my eyes straining against the dark, the stalks swaying as if alive, their whispers now a chorus of warning I couldn't ignore. Something's out there, I thought, my hands gripping the porch railing. The wood rough under my palms, my breath shallow as I searched for the source of the noise. Then I saw it, a shape emerging from the cornfield, stepping onto the road, its silhouette stark against the faint moonlight. At first I thought it was a deer, its form familiar, antlers catching the light. But as it moved closer, my blood turned to ice. This was no deer. It was tall, impossibly skinny, its legs long and spindly, its body twisted, malnourished, as if starvation had warped it into something new. Its head was deer-like, antlers jagged and uneven, but its eyes were too large, glowing with an unnatural yellow light, and its mouth, God, its mouth, stretched into a horrible grin, revealing sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed like knives. A predator's smile on a creature that should have been prey. It moved wrong, so wrong. Running across the road on two legs, its gait human-like, deliberate. Each step a mockery of nature, its body swaying as if defying the laws that bound it to the earth. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My body a statue of fear as it stopped in the middle of the road. It turned its head, those glowing eyes locking onto mine, burning through the darkness, piercing my soul with a gaze that knew me, that saw my fear and fed on it. Its grin widened, the jagged teeth glinting, a silent promise of something terrible, something that wanted me to know it was there, that it had chosen me to witness it. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest, my breath ragged, the night air cold against my skin. The cornfield's whispers now a hiss of anticipation, as if the stalks themselves were watching, waiting. Run, my mind screamed. But I was frozen, caught in its gaze, the world narrowing to those eyes, that grin, the horror of a creature that shouldn't exist. My aunt burst out of the house, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other, her face pale but fierce, her voice a roar as she shouted, "Get away!" She fired a blast into the air, the sound a thunderclap that shattered the night, the muzzle flash a brief fire in the dark. The creature moved, faster than anything that broken should, its two-legged sprint a blur as it vanished into the woods, the trees swallowing it whole, their branches rustling as if in protest, the night falling, silent once more. We didn't see it again that summer, but it never truly left me. My aunt and I sat on the porch until dawn, her shotgun across her lap, her hand on my shoulder, her silence a shared fear we couldn't voice. I had nightmares for years, waking in a cold sweat, those glowing eyes staring from the darkness of, my mind that jagged grin a specter that followed me into adulthood. What was it? I've spent years searching for answers, poring over tales of skinwalkers, cryptids, creatures born of folklore and fear. But nothing fits. Nothing explains the horror of that night. Now, as an adult, I can't drive past a cornfield at night without my heart racing, my eyes scanning the shadows, waiting for that two-legged deer to step out to grin at me again. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't done with me. The house, the cornfield, the woods, they've changed in my memory, their beauty tainted by the creature that turned a summer night into a nightmare I'll carry until I die, always wondering if it's still out there, waiting for me to return. The summer of 2019 was a haze of freedom, my 23rd year alive and untethered in a small Virginia suburb. I was working odd jobs, saving for a move to the city, my nights filled with the reckless joy of youth. My friend Tara invited me to a house party at her place, a sprawling ranch-style home tucked in a quiet cul-de-sac, its lawn dotted with fairy lights and laughter. The air was thick with the scent of grilled burgers, cheap beer, and honeysuckle. the kind of night that felt invincible. I arrived with a six-pack, my sneakers scuffing the gravel drive, the music's pulse pulling me toward the glow of the backyard. Inside, the house was a kaleidoscope of chaos, bodies swaying to a thumping bass, red solo cups littering every surface, voices overlapping in a drunken symphony. Tara greeted me with a hug, her eyes bright with wine, and I melted into the crowd, the beer loosening my edges. The living room was a blur of faces, some familiar, others strangers drawn by the promise of a good time. I was on my second drink, laughing with a group by the kitchen when I felt it, a prickle on my neck, like a cold finger tracing my spine. Someone's watching, my mind whispered, an embedded command I couldn't ignore. I turned, scanning the room, and met his eyes. He stood by the patio door, a man in his 30s, lean and unremarkable, his flannel shirt and jeans blending into the crowd. But his eyes were wrong, sharp, unblinking, cutting through the haze, like a blade. He held a beer, untouched, his lips curled in a half-smile that didn't reach his gaze. I forced a nod, expecting him to look away, but he didn't. He stared, his eyes pinning me, a predator sizing up prey. My stomach twisted, the room's warmth fading, replaced by a chill that seeped into my bones. Walk away, I told myself, but his gaze held me, a silent challenge I didn't understand. He approached, weaving through the crowd, his steps deliberate, his smile widening as he closed the distance. "Nice party," he said, his voice low, gravelly, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. I mumbled a reply, my throat dry, but he kept talking, his words a rambling stream. Something about the town, the weather, a job he didn't have. His eyes never left mine, darting over my face, my hands, my posture, as if cataloging me. Each sentence felt like a probe, testing my reactions, searching for weakness. I shifted, my beer warm in my hand, the music now a distant hum. "Gotta grab another drink," I said, forcing a laugh, and slipped away, my heart pounding as I pushed through the crowd. His gaze followed, a weight I could feel, and I didn't stop until I was outside, the night air a sharp relief against my flushed skin. I left early, the party's glow no match for the unease that clung to me. Tara waved as I drove off, her laughter echoing, oblivious to the shadow I'd met. I told myself it was nothing, just too much beer, too little sleep, but his eyes haunted me, glinting in the rearview mirror as I navigated the dark streets home. A week later, I was scrolling through my phone, the TV droning in the background, when a news alert stopped me cold. His face stared back from the screen, those same sharp eyes, that same half-smile. He'd been arrested, charged with murdering a woman in a nearby county, her body found in a ditch, her life stolen by the man I'd met at Tara's. The report detailed his history, a drifter, a predator, a killer who'd slipped through society's cracks. My hands shook, the phone slipping to the couch, the room spinning as the truth sank in. I'd stood feet from a murderer, his eyes on me, his voice in my ears, his intent a mystery I'd escaped by chance. I called Tara, my voice breaking as I recounted the night, his stare, my flight. She went quiet, then whispered, "He asked about you after you left." My blood ran cold, the world tilting as I realized how close I'd come to being his next target. I remembered a story my cousin told me years ago, a nested tale about a man at a bar who'd seemed charming until he followed a woman home, his smile hiding a knife. "Trust your gut," she'd said, her voice heavy with warning. That story anchored me now, making the stranger's gaze feel not just real but fated, a brush with death I'd walked away from. The memory of his eyes, his smile burns in me, a scar I carry in quiet moments, a reminder of the danger that hides in plain sight. Parties lost their shine after that. I avoid crowded rooms, stick to familiar faces. My laughter cautious, my trust fractured. Every stranger's glance pulls me back to that night, to the man by the patio door, his eyes a promise of something I'll never unsee. I keep my doors locked, my phone close, but the fear lingers, a shadow that no light can erase. Some monsters don't need to strike to terrify you. They stand in the crowd, smiling, waiting for you to meet their gaze. Have you ever stood in a place so alive with noise and light, yet heard a voice that shouldn't be there, a whisper from the void that chills your soul? That's what happened to me, on a lonely night shift at the casino, where the shadows spoke, louder than the slot machines. It was a cold winter evening in a bustling Nevada casino, a glittering fortress of chance where I worked as a security guard. My nights spent watching over the chaos of gamblers and neon lights. But that night, a voice, an old man's voice, greeted me with a good morning that echoed in the empty air, a sound that turned my world upside down. This is the story of the voice that wasn't there, the casino that hid its secrets, and the fear that still haunts my every step. I'd been a security guard at the Silver Oasis Casino for nearly a decade, a job I'd taken after leaving the military, seeking the stability of routine in a world that felt too unpredictable. The casino was a beast of its own, a sprawling labyrinth of flashing lights and ringing bells, its floors alive with the hum of slot machines, the clatter of chips, the laughter of winners and the sighs of losers. I worked the graveyard shift, midnight to dawn, my boots echoing on the polished marble as I patrolled the gaming floors, my eyes scanning for trouble, drunk patrons, cheaters, thieves. The air was thick with the scent of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. The lights a kaleidoscope of reds and golds, a sensory assault that kept me alert, even on the quietest nights. I liked the solitude of the late hours, the way the casino seemed to breathe, its energy a living thing that pulsed beneath the surface, a beast I'd learned to tame. The Silver Oasis had its legends, stories whispered in the break room by old-timers who'd seen too much. They spoke of a man who'd died here in the 70s, a regular named Old Jimmy, a gambler who'd lost everything at the blackjack table and taken his life in the parking lot. His ghost said to wander the halls, searching for one last win. I'd laughed at the tales, my military training grounding me in logic, in the belief that the world was made of things I could see, touch, fight. But there were nights when the casino felt different, when the lights flickered for no reason, and the air grew heavy, as if the walls themselves held memories they couldn't release. I'd felt it before, a prickle on my neck, a sense of being watched, but I'd always dismissed it, blaming fatigue, the long hours, the endless noise. That night the casino was quieter than usual, the late hour thinning the crowd to a handful of diehards at the slots, their faces lit by the glow of spinning reels. I was making my rounds, my flashlight swinging at my hip, my radio crackling with static as I checked the main entrance, a grand archway of glass and gold that led to the gaming floor. The air was cold, a draft seeping through the doors, carrying the scent of winter pine and distant snow, a stark contrast to the casino's artificial warmth. I stood there, my breath fogging in the chill, my eyes scanning the empty entrance, the silence a rare moment of peace in a place that never slept. I thought of my daughter, asleep at home with her grandmother, her laughter a memory that kept me grounded, a reason to endure the long nights. Then I heard it, a voice as clear as day, an old man's voice, soft but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Good morning," it said, the words echoing in the empty space, a greeting that shouldn't have been there. Not at 3 in the morning, not in a casino where no one stood. My heart stopped, a cold dread pooling in my chest as I spun around, my flashlight slicing through the dark, searching for the source. The entrance was empty, the glass doors reflecting my own pale face, my own wide eyes, but the voice lingered, a whisper in my mind, a sound that wasn't meant for the living. Called out, my voice trembling, "Who's there?" But the silence answered, heavy and wrong, as if the casino itself had swallowed the sound, holding it in its walls. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, my hand on my radio, ready to call for backup, but what would I say? That I'd heard a ghost, a voice from nowhere, a greeting that defied reality. I forced myself to move, my boots echoing on the marble, my flashlight beam shaking as I checked the corners, the shadows, the spaces where someone might hide. But there was nothing. No one. Just the empty entrance, the glass doors, the faint hum of the casino beyond. A world that felt too far away, too unreal. The air was heavier now, the scent of pine replaced by something older, something metallic like rust and regret. A smell that clung to my skin, a reminder of something I couldn't name. I thought of old Jimmy, the gambler's ghost, his story. No longer a joke, but a truth I couldn't deny. A presence I couldn't see but felt in my bones. I checked the cameras, my hands trembling as I sat in the security office. The monitors a grid of black and white reality that should have held the answers. The entrance camera showed nothing. No man, no movement, just the empty space where I'd stood. My own figure pacing, searching. A lone guard haunted by a voice that wasn't there. The footage looped, the timestamp ticking forward, but the screen stayed empty, a void where a man should have been. A confirmation that what I'd heard wasn't human, wasn't real. I rewound, watched again, my heart pounding, but the result was the same. No one, nothing, just the silence of the casino. A silence that now felt alive, a beast that watched me through the screens. I radioed my partner, my voice steady but strained, asking if he'd seen anyone, but he hadn't. His tone casual, oblivious to the terror gripping my chest. I returned to the entrance, unable to stay away, my flashlight beam shaking as I stood where I'd heard the voice. The spot now, a scar on my memory. The air was colder, the scent of rust stronger. The casino's hum a distant echo as if the world had retreated, leaving me alone with something I couldn't name. I thought of the stories, of old Jimmy, of others who'd heard voices here, whispers in the dark, greetings from men who weren't there, tales I'd dismissed but now believed. The night stretched on, endless, each sound a threat. The clink of a slot machine, the shuffle of a late-night gambler, the creak of the building, settling. Each one a reminder of the voice, the presence, the thing that had chosen me. I finished my shift, my hands trembling, my mind racing. The casino no longer a place of routine, but a labyrinth of shadows, a beast I couldn't tame. I sought answers, speaking to the old-timers, the ones who'd worked here longer than I had, their eyes sharp with the wisdom of years. They told me of old Jimmy, of others who'd heard him, his voice a greeting, a warning, a reminder of the casino's past, a past that wouldn't stay buried. They spoke of a fire in the 60s, a tragedy that killed a dozen patrons, their spirits tied to the silver oasis, their voices echoing in the night, searching for peace they'd never find. The stories chilled me, but they offered no comfort, only a name for the terror that had marked me, a name I couldn't escape. I kept working, my nights spent watching, waiting, the voice a shadow that followed me, a whisper I couldn't unhear. Now, years later, I still hear it, the old man's voice. Good morning, a scar on my soul, echoing in every shadow, every quiet night. I left the casino, took a job in an office, a place of daylight and normalcy, but the voice came with me, A reminder of the night I stood at the entrance, a guard who'd seen too much. The silver oasis still stands, its lights still flashing, its floors still alive with the hum of chants. But the whispers remain. Stories of voices, of ghosts, of a guard who heard what he shouldn't. What was that voice, and why did it choose? Me, I ask you, because I'm lost in this nightmare. Do you know? The banging on the glass door shattered the quiet of my living room. A series of loud, deliberate thuds that echoed through the house like a warning. I was alone, a teenager curled up on the couch, the TV's glow the only light in the dark, when the sound jolted me upright, my heart leaping into my throat. It was 9:00 p.m., the night outside a solid wall of black, and through the glass I saw him, a tall man in a dark jacket, his fist pounding relentlessly, his shadowed face twisted, with an anger I couldn't understand. I froze, the air turning cold with a dread I couldn't name, knowing that whatever stood on the other side of that door didn't belong in my world. I was a teenager back then, living in a modest house with a glass door that opened from the living room to the backyard, a feature I'd always loved for its view of the stars, until that night. My parents often worked late, leaving me alone, a routine I'd grown used to, though the quiet of the house at night always carried a subtle unease. It was around 9:00 p.m., the TV flickering with a sitcom I barely paid attention to, its canned laughter a hollow comfort against the darkness pressing against the windows. The living room was dim, the lamp beside the couch casting a weak glow over the worn carpet, the air heavy with the scent of the pizza I'd eaten earlier. I was sprawled on the couch, a blanket draped over my legs, when the first bang came, sharp and insistent, rattling the glass in its frame. I muted the TV, my breath catching as I listened, hoping it was just the wind or a stray animal. But the banging came again, louder, more deliberate, each thud a hammer against my nerves. I stood, my legs shaky, and crept toward the door, my heart racing as I tried to stay calm. Feel the glass trembling, don't you? The thought whispered in my mind as I reached the door, the cold seeping through the glass against my palm. Outside, a man stood, tall and imposing, his dark jacket blending into the night, his face obscured by shadow, but his eyes glinted with a fury that made my blood run cold. He pounded again, his fist relentless, and shouted through the glass, "I'm here to sharpen your knives. Want to let me in?" His voice was rough, insistent, and the words sent a chill down my spine. We hadn't called anyone, and who would come at this hour for such a task? I froze, terror rooting me to the spot, my voice trembling as I shouted back, "I'm not interested. Leave." But he didn't stop, his banging growing more frantic, his voice rising as he insisted he could. "Do it right now." His words a plea laced with menace. I stumbled back, my mind racing, and ran to the kitchen, grabbing my phone from the counter with shaking hands. I dialed my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who lived just a few houses down, his number a lifeline in the panic. As I spoke, my voice quivering, the banging suddenly stopped, an eerie silence settling over the house. I crept back to the living room, phone pressed to my ear, and peered through the glass door. The man was gone, but in his place a woman stood in the backyard, her figure illuminated faintly by the moonlight. She was still, her expression blank, her eyes locked on me with an intensity that felt like a physical weight, pinning me in place. My heart pounded, a scream trapped in my throat as I backed away, the woman's stare burning into me, unblinking, unyielding. Mr. Thompson arrived minutes later, his flashlight cutting through the dark as we searched the backyard together. But there was no trace of them. No footprints, no signs of disturbance, just the empty expanse of grass stretching into the night. He suggested they might have been trying to break in, spooked when they realized I'd called for help, but the absence of evidence left a hollow feeling in my chest. I reported it to the police, describing the man's dark jacket, the woman's blank stare, but they found no one matching the description. The case left unresolved, a shadow over my sense of safety. I'd heard whispers in the neighborhood before, stories shared over backyard fences, of strangers who came at night, of break-ins that left no trace, of figures seen in yards that vanished without a sound. I'd thought them exaggerated, but now they felt like warnings I'd ignored, etched into the history of this quiet street. That night changed me, leaving me so shaken that I still flinch at the thought of being alone in a house with a glass. Even now, years later, the memory of that woman's blank stare haunts me. A chilling reminder of the terror I felt, the unshakable certainty that someone was out there, watching, waiting, just beyond the glass. Still with us? Then maybe you're braver than most, or maybe you're just next. We've traveled through 16 terrifying accounts, each one darker, stranger, more unsettling than the last. But here's the truth. We've barely scratched the surface. There are still whispers in the woods, still eyes behind motel curtains, still voices in the static. And for every story we've told, there are a dozen more clawing to be heard. So, if your curiosity is stronger than your fear, you know what to do. Subscribe, turn on that bell, and meet us here again for the next descent into the unknown. Because the shadows don't rest, they follow. And sometimes the next story finds you before you find it.